Hello,
Yeah,
everybody.
for
Welcome to the
sure.
show. We have an amazing guest on here today. This is Dr. Doug Graham. Doug, it's been a while since you've been on. Say hello to the audience.
Hey, everybody, it's good to see you.
Yes, everybody, if you don't know who Dr. Doug Graham is, you're probably hiding under a rock or something. He is one of the leading raw food teachers and also personal experience doing it longer than most people alive. And Doug, thanks for being on the show. I know you're so busy.
Paul, it's a treat. I love spending time with you. You're a major force for good. Like you say, we go way back, and I'm just having a blast. I've been all around the world a couple of times this year, uh, all over Eastern Europe. I was speaking at 9 different festivals this year, and then ran a couple of my own. The last one was up in Bali. Um, Bali was better than any of the hype I've ever heard about Bali.
Wow, that's amazing. Did you eat durian while
Um,
you were there?
Unlimited durian every day.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I want to talk to you. There's so many different ways to eat a raw food diet and so many different ways to get into it. But you've tested them all. You've been doing this a long time. Your background is amazing, everybody. I'm going to put a link to the last video we did with Doug talking about that. But I want to talk specifically about the 80-10-10 diet, this book that you wrote
Hmm.
after many years of experimenting with different ways of eating and healing and working with a lot of people. And
Yeah,
now it's been over 20 years, even longer, 25 years, so that you've been have this book and philosophy out and you've been doing this. And tell everybody what the 80-10-10 diet is. And then I'm going to ask you questions that people get me on that.
sure. Well, as you say, I spent 20 years refining my raw food diet, trying the different options that were out there. I knew I wanted to eat raw. Raw made the most sense. And I struggled with most of the different ways. One way or another, I either end up with cravings or I go back to cook food or I couldn't maintain my athleticism. I start feeling sluggish. Um, and when 80-10-10 became clear to me back in the mid 90s, early 90s, it was, uh, I just started implementing it and then went another decade before the book came out in 2006. And then since then, I really haven't looked back. I mean, as you know, I was lecturing on 80-10-10 all through the early 2000s. It was creating quite a stir because it was just so different than the way most people do it. Most people eat a very high fat diet. 80-10-10 refers to the caloronutrients, or what are known as macronutrients, those that give us calories. There's carbohydrates, there's proteins, and fats. So 80-10-10 refers to the ratio of carbohydrates to proteins to fats. In the vegan world, they use the same ratio, 80-10-10, as an ideal that we want to have a minimum of 80% of our calories coming from carbs and a maximum of about 95% of calories coming from carbs. So, somewhere in that range, which means that proteins and fats typically run between 3 to 10% of calories. And by doing that in a raw food approach, it was it was night and day for me. It was so profound, like tuning in the radio station until it finally became crystal clear, or tuning in a microscope where it's just fuzzy and then boom, crystal clear. And it was so profound because as soon as I hit 80-10-10 raw vegan, suddenly my mind got really clear. I could remember things that I could never remember before. I could pay attention better. I needed less sleep. My accident proneness disappeared. Um, my energy went through the roof. I needed 2 less hours sleep per night. I was recovering from fitness faster than anything I'd ever done. So I spent the next 10 years really developing the vocabulary that would explain to others why 80-10-10 works so well. And doing the research required to be able to say, oh, well, look, yes, it's got to do with telomeres, and yes, it's got to do with all sorts of um, internal body functions that I read something today, in fact, that was kind of odd. I was reading about a guy who in the 1800s, he interviewed and studied native populations all throughout North and South America. More than 1 million people in his lifetime in the various tribes and native peoples that he checked, and they were all different from each other, and they all had one thing in common: profound health. He said it was just profound health. And in his writings, he narrowed it down to diet, and said that in a healthy diet there is no illness. In health there is no illness whatsoever. And when the diet strays and starts to include things that are either toxic for us or not helpful to us, outright harmful in various ways, addictive, um, illness just starts to show up left, right, and center. And it started with infant mortality. He said there was almost no infant mortality at all, other than accidents. There was no birthing deaths, either the children or the mothers. And this was profoundly different than what was happening in Europe, or people living in civilized situations, what they called civilization. Um, it simply didn't happen. Health was the natural state, and I think it still is. I can say with assurance that health is the natural state. Just like for a house plant, health is the natural state. And if your plant isn't healthy, you change the conditions, either give it more light or less water or more water or whatever it needs. The same is true for us. If we get everything we need and nothing we don't, then thriving to the point of profound health beyond what most people understand health could be, really flourishing, um, like the plants that I see behind you, Paul.
Yes. So, how many years have you been on an all raw vegan diet now?
Well, I started the raw vegan diet back in 1978. Did not figure out how to get to an all raw vegan diet for about 7 years. Since 85, I went on an all raw vegan diet. And even then, occasionally messed up, slipped up, um, just got lack of experience and various situations, and occasionally I would go off the plan.
Sure, sure.
So, but from 85 onward, the intention was 100% raw food diet, all raw, all the time, count on it. Uh, and and I really haven't looked back from that. By 92, so again another 7 years, um, I had worked the bugs out and figured out what I was doing wrong, and it was simply a matter of eating insufficient fruit. When I started with all raw, I started with fruit as my breakfast meal, and eventually realized that wasn't enough. I would get drawn to starches, uh, looking obviously for more carbohydrates as an athlete. And um, so then I went to fruit for lunch and fruit for breakfast and fruit for lunch. And I did much better, but I would still, after 6 months or 9 months, start feeling like something was missing. And so I said, when I did the math, when I crunched the numbers, I mean, this is what I went to school to be able to do in the world of nutrition. And I looked at it and I go, oh, you know what? I'm really still shorting myself on carbohydrates. I'm still only getting like in the 70s carbohydrates. I'm relying too much on fats. And I cut the fats further by adding more fruit in, which meant that now whether I was consciously aware of it or not, there was a lack of carbohydrates, which I changed by adding fruit before my dinner meal. So now I'm eating fruit for breakfast, fruit for lunch, and then fruit again before my dinner meal. And the dinner meal would be as much salad as I wanted to have, as much vegetables prepared any way I wanted to make them. I've always loved vegetables since I was a kid. My mom trained us to eat vegetables, so I count that as a lucky thing. I like vegetables, um, and and I like that with vegetables I get to eat some volume as well because I like eating volume. So at this point, that's pretty much the way the diet evolved. By the 90s, I was having something very juicy fruit in the morning. I was having very sweet fruit in the midday. I was usually having some kind of an acid fruit or subacid fruit before dinner salad, and I'm still doing that to this day.
Now, you mentioned different types of fruits. Did you follow food combining? Like, were they purposely juicy, acid, and subacid before your dinner meal?
Yes, I learned about food combining very early on, 1985, 1983. 1983, I learned about food combining. Someone mentioned the book Food Combining Made Easy, which I read, and it wasn't that easy. It
Yeah.
wasn't. But then I read that was Herbert Shelton's book, Food Combining Made Easy. But then I ran into the sort of the Cliff Notes version, which was Dennis Nelson's book called Food Combining Simplified. And with his book, things kind of came more clear. But I found for sure that my digestion was better for me. Some people don't really notice much difference. For me, I noticed that my digestion was better. My elimination was, um, as R.C. Deeney coined the phrase in 2001, he called it perfectpoo.com.
Okay.
And
So,
I'm
but yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
noticing perfect poo happening when I food combine, and when I don't, it's not so perfect.
And so is that why you were doing like juicy fruit in the morning, subacid in the afternoon, and acidic more fruit?
No, no. My rationale was this: I stop eating at 6 or 7 or 5 in the afternoon, whenever it was, relatively early in the evening. I stop eating. I'm going to go 12 or 14 or 16 or even 18 hours with no food at all, no water, I haven't had anything in a long time, but I've been breathing and I'm losing water and I want watery fruit. I want melon. I want juicy things. I want berries. It could be mangoes or peaches, but something with enough juice to rehydrate me, as opposed to dried fruit or super, super sweet fruit where you really need to, for me, I need to drink water along with that or before that or even after. So I would do that and it would rehydrate me and give me a little bit of sugar. Um, I want that glucose. I know every cell of my body is fueled by glucose. I might as well give it sufficient glucose. Um, my lunch meal, usually by lunchtime, I've been active and I've done something and I need to refuel rather than run out of fuel. And the fuel, again, every cell of the body's fueled by glucose. with a secondary choice of fructose for about 90% of the body's cells. There's some that only use glucose, but most will take glucose or fructose. So those are the two sugars supplied by fruit, by ripe fruit. And so I want to get some calories in. As an athletic person back then, I was eating pretty much 4,000 calories a day. In order to get that, I needed some calorie dense food. It needed to be bananas, it needed to be canistel, it needed to be something really rich, sapodilla, figs, something with major calorie hit, persimmon this time of year. And then before dinner, the reason I tend to go, as I said, with acid or subacid fruit is because I'm usually going to include some kind of fat with my dinner meal, whether it's nuts or seeds or avocados. And the acids in berries, the acids in mango and peach and all the other subacid fruits emulsify the fats. They actually aid with the digestion of the fats. So I could throw a bunch of berries into my dinner salad, and it actually makes the fats in the dinner salad easier to digest yet again. For me, making my digestion easy means that I can put more energy into physical activities. As you know, I'm still fond of my physical activities. I won national championships this year in powerlifting. I'll be back defending my title in June.
Well, that's amazing. So I got a bunch of questions, and everybody, I'm sorry about the quality of the video. Doug's in another country, so sorry about the quality here, but we get to hear him. We're still hearing him, so that's good. Back then, when you were eating right before your dinner meal, which had fats, were you waiting a certain amount of time, or did you just eat the fruit and then eat the salad or the fats like right after?
I've done it both ways. Uh, for my own preferences, I like eating the fruit and then having a pause before the salad. I've done it both ways, and I still do it both ways on occasion. Depends on the nature of the event. But in my own home, I will tend to have that juicy fruit and then let some time pass. It could be 20 minutes, it could be an hour. Uh, and sometimes if I'm at an event and we're serving food, then it's just a matter of having the juicy fruit or having juices. Um, Having orange juice or mango orange juice is my favorite. It's mango orange juice blend. Uh, and then just talk to people for a little while, maybe give some gratitudes, maybe express all the goodness that happened in the course of the day and recount it for people to share, um, or our intentions for the coming day. And then once we've had a little bit of prayer, as it was, then go on to my salads.
How long is it until it becomes a different meal? Like, so you eat the fruit and then
It's a
sometime.
great question. I ask people the same question when they're lifting weights and they go, okay, I'm going to do five. And I go, is that like five in a row, or is it one and then a moment's pause and then another? How long does it become a different meal? I The thing about people, including myself, we love to put things in boxes and categories, and nature defies this totally. So in high society, for instance, we'll often see that the meal is stretched out, and there'll be pre-dinner drinks, and then there'll be some talk, and then there'll be hors d'oeuvres, and then there'll be some talk, and then maybe there's some finger food passed out or some little dish, and then there's some talk, and then there's soup, and then there's some talk. And I don't know. I don't think that counts as six different meals. I think it was like one meal. So I have my fruit, and then I pause and have the dinner meal. Uh, if there's 4 hours in between, it's definitely two different meals.
Sure. Now, from a combining standpoint, I mean, fast forward now, do you just eat more in your other meals and then eat your salad meal alone, or do you still eat fruit and then have a salad or fat right afterwards?
I definitely have fruit before my dinner meal. I know that when I don't have fruit before a dinner meal, at the end of that meal, I'm going to start looking around for something else to eat. I'm going to be driven. I'm going to be looking for nuts. I'm going to be looking for something heavy. I'm going to be looking for something rich. I'm going to be looking for something sweet. I'm going to be looking for something which tells me I wasn't fully satisfied. Now, I understand, as we all do, that certainly I was trained to eat that way, right? To have dinner meal be so unsatisfactory that I want dessert afterwards. Now I'm eating my dessert at the beginning of the meal. I, I've satisfied that need for sugar. Once I've satisfied the need for sugar, now I can eat the vegetables. A, because I like eating. B, because I want the volume. C, because I feel they supply a mineral to sugar ratio that is advantageous, um, on through the various nutrient to calorie ratio explanations that people have heard. So
Sure.
for all those reasons, uh, and as I say, I've always loved eating vegetables. So I do know people who say, "Oh, it's tough to eat vegetables," and I go, "Yeah, it's a good habit to develop."
So, Dr. Stanley Bass back in the day had what he would call like his eating order of just eating the fruit first. It wasn't necessarily considered food combining as much as it was considered just being wise and the foods that digest faster, eating first. But it's kind of like food combining, but he had a different name for it.
Well, it's there's there's several other names that have been used, and I've seen it. I've seen approaches to food combining being broken down in different ways. So I use Stanley's approach as part of my food combining, if you will. But another aspect of food combining, like the part we're most familiar with, is the proteins and starches are separated, and the super sweet fruits and the acid fruits are separated. Well, we can also look at it from a water content standpoint, in which case the I'm eating water-rich foods, which is what I said for my breakfast meal. I'm eating sugar-rich foods for my lunch meal, and then in the dinner meal, there is what we could refer to as a segue. You're segueing from one thing to the next if you're eating multiple courses. And in the case of multiple courses, then the the wettest, the juiciest things would come first because they pass through your system fastest.
Or
It's actually the opposite of food combining. It's food separating, and it's a smart way to go as well. So we separate. I'm gonna have my fruit first, and it goes quickly. And by the time I introduce the next thing, it's never going to catch up with what I had first. So it's not really combining. It's separating. It's segue from one thing to the next. I've talked to other people who do their food combining yet another way, and what they do is they say they only eat mono meals. But when I go into detail with them, what turns out is they only eat mono foods. So they'll eat some oranges and then eat some lettuce and then eat some nuts and then whatever it might be. But they say, I'm eating one food at a time, kind of like a monkey would probably do out in the jungle. Oh, look, here's some fruit. Let's eat it. Oh, there's not enough to go around. Let's move on to the next thing, see what else we can find. and then they find the next thing. And so they're eating mono mini meals. I'm
Sure.
not a big fan of mini meals. I'm not a big fan of 8 meals a day. Uh, I'd rather eat until I was satiated and then not think about food for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours uh, until it's time to eat again for sure. And in between, I can be super active, super focused, do all the things that make life interesting. To me, I love food. As I said, you were saying at the beginning how the jujubes are so, looking forward to it and so fantastic, and various fruits are just amazing stuff. And yet, so is a good night's sleep. Amazing stuff. So is fresh air. Amazing stuff. Um, I was just ice skating with my daughter. It was a great fitness session. Amazing stuff. All of the requirements of life feel good. And yet I live for the things that are interesting in my head much, much more than I live to get myself air and exercise and sleep and great food. I'm excited about food. I love talking about food, especially fruits. And yet my life is about other things beyond that. Bigger
Ab-
ideas, if I would.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know we don't have much time left, but there's three or four things I definitely want to
Go
touch
ahead.
upon with you.
Go
So,
ahead.
so when it comes to that, some people today, first of all, everybody, you need to understand the importance of food combining because if you're not following good food combining, it's the beginning of all disease pretty much because you're slowing down the food and you're mixing it together and you got fermentation happening and just a whole bunch of other issues and it leads to many issues. And
Yep.
the reason why I mention that, Doug, is because now there are people promoting kind of like the opposite. They're saying, well, when you eat the fruit by itself, it's getting too much of a blood spike too quickly. But if you eat the fat first, it'll slow it down. And you and I disagree with that totally. But
Yeah, I totally disagree with body hacking.
yeah, but
Any
this is
kind of
what, but
body
you agree
hacking.
this is what they're erroneously teaching now as to lower
Yes, this
blood
is
sugar.
erroneous.
Yeah.
This is erroneous, and we're not looking to slow it down um, any more. Whether than when you put gasoline in your car, you're looking to slow down the refueling process. My body is made to refuel itself on fruit, and and we're designed to eat fruit. We do not have to slow that down. The difference is whether there's also a need for that specific glucose. So we create the need in two ways. One, you allow time. When we allow time to pass, uh, because the body's constantly using glucose for the functioning of every cell, the more time that passes, the more there's a need for some glucose refueling. When we're physically active, we use calories. Once again, we're using glucose, and you create a need. So if if I drive past a hotel where there's no vacancy, then if my muscle cells are totally full, they can't take on the sugar. If you eat fat with fruit, invariably, this has been known since 1959. It was published in the American Journal of the American Medical Association. Um, they've known since 1959 that eating fat slows glucose uptake from the bloodstream. There's a name for this. It's called diabetes. It's not something we're striving for. I want the sugar that I eat to go directly into my bloodstream and then directly to my cells. That will happen, A, if the fat is minimized, and B, if there's already need, either time or exercise or both.
Okay. The three other topics here before we go, and I only because
We're,
we run
we're
out of time,
doing
but
fine.
we will have Dr. Graham back on and get more into some questions. Maybe even
You
doing
honor me.
A live Q&A one night, maybe with the
That'd be
audience.
great. That'd be
Yeah.
great fun.
So the next thing is you mentioned back in the day you used to have your breakfast meal, your lunch meal, your dinner meal, and then your sleep till how many hours you had from till when you woke up. And you also mentioned the joy of sleep and air and everything else. So, are you a proponent of what they call intermittent fasting, or taking a break from like trying to get a certain amount of hours from your dinner to your breakfast, or because
No,
you've met because another
no,
thing you mentioned was you're not a fan of eating 8 meals a day or eating all day.
exactly. So,
So talk to me about it.
okay, I'm a fan of intermittent eating, which means I eat a meal that satiates me, and then I don't think about food again for a good long while. Just like after I pee, I don't think about it for a good long while, or anything else like that. After I get a good night's sleep, I don't think about it again until the next night.
Yeah, but titles aside, after you eat like your dinner meal,
Yes,
and because you're doing this the way you're eating, you're satisfying yourself in that meal because you're
yes,
getting enough what you need. Are you done eating till the next day, or do you still
yes.
say
No,
so?
I'm done eating. I'm done. Um,
So 3 meals a day is where you're at, or you suggest, or is pretty much that it for
Depends on the activity level of the individual. So when I'm
okay.
talking to professional athletes that are going through 6 or 8,000 calories a day, they're going to eat 4, 5, sometimes even 6 meals a day. They're blowing through fuel so fast. For people who are only eating 1,500 calories a day, uh, gosh, they might get it all in 2 meals. Um, so yeah, it's not a word game. You're right. You're right. Uh, the thing is though that when we use the word, for me specifically, um, when I use the word fasting, it means it equates with resting, a deeper phase of resting than any other known to man, and it's a deeper rest than that achieved when we sleep. Fasting is a deeper rest than sleeping, which is quite deep. Okay, so um, when people use the word intermittent fasting as if in between each meal we are fasting, it's a misnomer because the body is not fasting. Body has to go through 18 to 72 hours worth of physiologic changes before it can get into what's called a fasting state. And all of those changes along the way, the body's not fasting yet. It's just preparing for fasting. So to say, oh, it's intermittent fasting because I haven't eaten for 3 hours, I'm fasting, or 8 hours, I'm fat. No, the body's using all the reserves that it already has. It's in no way in a fasting state, nor is the person resting at all. They're not stopping any of their daily activities.
Let me reword the question and say, is it, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but just for time, do you feel it's beneficial if somebody's eating, whether based on their activity, whether it's 2 meals or 5 meals a day, do you think it's beneficial for somebody to get a longer break when they go to sleep to when they wake up in the morning as their first meal to their second meal and third meal?
I think for people who aren't eating well, that a long break uh, gives the body a chance to recover from what they've just done harm to themselves. Uh, for people who are eating well, low fat, raw vegan, um, the the delay is has pluses and minuses. So I could look at and say, well, look at this plus that happens by making a delay. I would much rather suggest eating when hungry than coming up with some plan and then attempting to implement the plan. I'd much rather pee when I need to go pee, sleep when I'm sleepy, eat when I'm hungry. That to me makes more sense than saying, oh, I should only inhale 4 times a minute and I'm going to control it. The same thing when people start to do that with food, it's great for the mental growth, um, but is it automatically a healthier plan to extend that period of time as long as possible? Um, no, I'm going to go with no.
Okay. Do you think it's beneficial that people should wait or have an empty stomach? Not an empty stomach.
Absolutely
I'm trying to
yes.
find the words. I'm saying
Yes, I'm
before
going to go
going.
yes. I'm going to go yes with that. Uh, I definitely want my stomach to empty before I eat again.
Now, when you say empty, do you mean have a bowel movement or do you just mean,
No, my stomach,
yeah,
not my bowels.
yeah. Now, but
Um,
my question, I guess, was your before going to sleep, how important it is to like not eat right before going to sleep, or that don't make a difference? Like, does it affect your sleep?
it definitely affects your sleep. If I'm digesting food while I'm trying to sleep or while I'm sleeping, then I'm working. My digestive system is working, and this is what's called a restless sleep. If I want to have nightmares, then eat something really rich right before. I can guarantee nightmares if I eat nuts before going to sleep.
Sure.
So
I want to respect your time. I know we only got a
no,
few minutes,
I appreciate that, and
so
we'll
here
come
we
back and
go.
finish.
We're gonna run through this. So when you
So
say have an empty stomach before you go to sleep, explain to people. I mean, before you eat your next meal, explain to people what that interprets for you to mean.
well, right now I can feel there's food in my stomach. I ate about an hour and a half ago. The food is still there. There's a full feeling. It's very satiating. At some point, I will physically feel my stomach empty those contents. This doesn't mean hunger. Hunger is a different feeling from empty stomach, but I certainly want empty stomach before I'm thinking about eating again. Um, I know maybe more than a lot of the people you interview, I know Paul Nissan. And I know the digestive history and the struggles and the health gain and the attention that you have put into this issue is great. Uh, and so I honor that, knowing full well that I want to eat till I'm satisfied, and I don't want to eat again until I need to eat again, which could be 3 hours, but it's more likely going to be 6 or 8.
Is now after doing this for so many years, have you gotten it down to where you find yourself eating the same time every day because or is it still different every day after all these years?
It still changes with the seasons.
Okay.
It definitely changes with the seasons. It definitely changes with travel. And it definitely changes with my social situation. I'm flexible enough uh, so that it changes with my social situation. When I'm running retreats, I'm very often in a situation where 3 meals a day are served. When I'm in my own home, I'm much more likely to be active until about 11 or 12 before I even have that first meal of the day. And then around 5 or 6, I'm going to have some fruit and right, like I say, half an hour later, have a big salad.
Great.
Uh,
Two more questions
so
because I know.
there's room for flexibility.
Okay, this is important. This next one, and then we're gonna finish off with one more. So the next one is you wrote a book that I don't hear very few people talking about this, and this is so important. A lot of people out there today that are promoting a vegan diet are promoting a heavy starch-based diet. and you wrote a book that changed my life called Grain Damage, and you
Yes.
talk about the negative aspects of the starches,
Hmm.
and so tell us a little about why so many people are running to like starches these days or promoting starches when they're so just well known, at least to you and me, just to be so bad for our bodies. And then after that topic, I got one more question, then we'll be done.
Okay, so I'll give you a Cliff Notes version on this one. One, when a prisoner in jail is bad, he gets punished. And he gets punished by being put on bread and water. It's punishment to eat starch. Okay. Two, uh, in school when we're kids, we play with paste and make paste and paper and make collages and things. And the teacher always tells the kids, don't eat the paste. And all it is grains and water. It's just flour and water. Don't eat the paste, the teacher says. Linus Pauling said that if you eat 100 times the vitamin C that the average person eats, you will become bulletproof. You cannot get sick. This is amazing stuff. Meanwhile, there's no vitamin C in starch based foods. Zero. We can't make up for this with other things. I'm looking to get on my diet. I eat about 100 times as much vitamin C as the next person, and I haven't been sick now in since 1980. Um, it's a pretty good streak. So uh, there's so many negative reactions to starch. Uh, we don't digest the oligosaccharides that make up many starches. We have no digestive enzymes for oligosaccharides, and those are medium chain medium chain starches. Let's call them that. And um, there's just so many reasons. You're growing fruit trees, and birds love it, and all sorts of animals love those fruit trees. And then, if you can imagine, cut down all the fruit trees to grow a monoculture of wheat or oats or rye. It makes no sense whatsoever. Trees are the answer to many of our problems.
That leads into my last question is uh, the 80-10-10 diet is great when you do, especially when you have, like me, the highest quality fruit out there. But the decline in the quality of fruit is getting worse and worse and worse. And if somebody decided that or somehow when you think about starches and the quality of fruit, so the question is the 80-10-10 diet with a high fruit base ideal for people that can't have access to good quality fruit? And if they try to add starches from a raw vegan standpoint, what's their option even? Are there raw vegan starches like what are they going to do? Carrots all day long? Or, so
Yeah, carrots barely count as starch. Carrots are
what's a
not
raw
starch.
vegan starch in your opinion?
Okay, a starch is something that you can make flour out of. Okay, so that you
Okay.
can make a dough. Starch is something that's doughy. Um, I would say that even the lowest quality fruits are better than the highest quality starches. We're back to this vitamin C issue, if no other, but there's 100 other reasons. There's a nutrient that's called a phytonutrient. There's about 200 or 250,000 of these phytonutrients. Almost all of them are anti-cancer and antioxidant agents, none of which exist in starchy foods, all of which can be found in fruits. This is huge. Now, although I recognize and agree with you that lower quality fruit is available than used to be available on the market, everywhere in the world there's access to great quality fruit. Everywhere in the world has five-star restaurants, and they're serving high quality food, and they can access high quality food. Anybody who wants high quality food can get it. They just have to learn how. They're not likely going to find it in their grocery store. I admit that. But access is there. And I encourage people to access the highest quality food possible. The food you eat is going to be a direct reflection. The quality of your food is going to be a direct reflection on the quality of your health.
Thank you, everybody. Dr. Doug Graham, I'm going to put his website below. You can find him all over social
Bless your
media,
heart.
Instagram, Facebook. We're going to have him back on. We might do a Q&A, but we're definitely going to have him back on when we have more time. We
That'll be
only had a
so
short
much fun.
window, but I'm so glad. Better short than nothing. So I'm so glad we got to interview you again. Thank you so much for being
Bless you.
here, and keep up the great work you're doing.
Bless you, Paul. It's a treat to spend time with you. I'll see you soon.
Thank
Nature's